You know, in a way, I kind of feel like this whole video is similar to those emails I get where people say, I want a 24 to 2000 millimeter lens that's f2.8 constant and only costs $800. And I'm like, that defies physics. But maybe some of you computer folks out there are saying, you want a computer under 3 pounds that's super powerful, but also under 1700 that has a full HDMI port. That's physically impossible. Hey everybody, welcome back to PhotoRec.tv. I'm Toby, and I want to talk about the Pixel 4. It's been out for a while, and I've got some thoughts on this phone, on this camera, and what Google needs to do to make me happy in the next release. And I want to talk about replacing my laptop. It's time. My old MacBook is failing. I need a new one, and I'm considering Windows. So I'm going to share with you what I'm looking for as a heavy Lightroom and Photoshop user in my next travel laptop. Let's start by talking about the Google Pixel 4. But first, quick history lesson. I've always been an Android phone user. Early days, I just really liked the customizability and how nicely it integrated with Google and all of Google's tools, which that's the world I'm in. I was an original Google Pixel 2 purchaser, just really liked this phone, worked well for me. And then Google sent me the Pixel 3 XL, and I thought that was a very good phone, really nice camera updates. Little jealous of many of the manufacturers having multiple lenses and the Google Pixel 3 deciding to go with only one. But, you know, it worked well enough that I didn't really miss that. And then just a year later, they sent me the Pixel 4. Now, I will say that I started to see some slowdowns and some stuttering with my Pixel 3 about 6 months into use. And I am a heavy phone user, so I attribute to that, and I'd wipe it and start over, and usually it would be fine. But I started having some camera issues where the camera just wouldn't launch properly without waiting for a couple of seconds. So I was very happy when Google sent me the Pixel 4 the next year. And I can say that 8 months in, still as hard a user of this phone as any previous ones, and it has been working really, really well. I'm very happy with it. None of that slowdown or stuttering that I've seen on previous Google Pixel phones. No camera issues at all. And of course, the headline feature when this came out was that astrophotography and just how well it did in low light. And I'll be honest, I've used that a couple of times for some spectacular results, but really only a couple of times. I use the night shot fairly often in just slightly lower light. I find that the white balance is so much better. It is, of course, higher quality in general. And I've just been really, really pleased with it. I think that they've done a really nice job in this phone. But the thing that frustrates me again and again, and it's more of those things that it's just because I can't. If I could, I probably wouldn't even want to that often. I'm talking about manual camera control. The native photo app in the Pixel 4 and all the Pixels is very simplistic, extremely simplistic. In a lot of ways, I'm totally fine with that because I'm a photographer. I've got a real camera with me almost all of the time. So this camera is really just for quick snapshots and memories. I'm not trying to make some amazing photo with it. But when I look over at what Samsung is offering and Sony with the Xperia line, and I look at those incredibly sweet and detailed manual camera experiences, and I am a little jealous. Especially, here's the big piece for me, is shutter speed. Now, some of you might be saying, hey, there are a lot of third-party camera apps out there. Put one of those on and you're going to be happy. No, because the Google people have blocked access, or at least limited all third-party camera all third-party camera apps don't allow you to extend the shutter speed past a quarter of a second. And again, yeah, this might come off as whining and silly, but I've got a camera in here that is incredibly capable I know that from doing those astrophoto modes. I would love the ability to say I want a 4 or 8 or 16 or 30-second exposure for something. You got the Moment Lens people, which, by the way, their app I think is one of my favorite third-party camera apps. That's from Moment. It's totally free. You don't have to use their lenses. It's just a good manual camera app. They offer filters. I could put a filter on and do a long exposure of a stream. And of course, the astrophotography mode or the long exposure mode, it doesn't work in brighter situations, even if you try to fool it with filters. I have. And you just get something nice like this guy that sits on the tripod, clamps right in. I'll put a link to this down below. I love it. But I would love to have full manual control. I would also like to have a wide-angle lens. It's not a deal breaker for me, and I think if I had to choose between telephoto and wide-angle, I would go with telephoto. So I'm happy with that decision that they made in this phone, but I would love to go ahead and stick one more lens in the next one. So those are all the good things that I want to say about it, except I really want to see a better manual camera app, or at least allow third-party developers to access the shutter speed and go longer than 1/4 of a second. You're just blocked. If I'm wrong about this, please comment down below, but I haven't found a single third-party camera app that allows you to go for longer shutter speeds. The other thing that I want to see, this isn't camera related, I want a return of the fingerprint sensor, especially since so many of us are walking around with masks on, and we're going to be doing that for the foreseeable future. I really dislike in the grocery store trying to pull up my grocery list again and having to type in my PIN. Come on, let's work. Fingerprint sensor, there's plenty of room for it. Put that back in it, please. And in general, there's just been a couple of times, just enough that the face unlock system just doesn't work as fast and as reliable as I want, so it annoys me. Another thing, and I mentioned this way back when I did a little bit of early preview about this, there is no back button now. It is a swipe function. And I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that. And I could say that it's been fine, except for when I'm in the Kindle app and reading on my phone. Swiping to turn a page and swiping to go out of an app or back is almost identical. And the number of times I go to turn a page and I close the Kindle app has been a bazillion. It's really annoying. So I would love to see something change that. My daughter has the Pixel 3a. I think that is a stunning value for cameras and phones. It is an awesome device, and right now on B&H it's about $320, and it has basically the same camera in it, just the one though, not the telephoto, and it does the astrophotography mode, but it also doesn't allow access for longer shutter speeds. But that is a great deal. I think that's all I want to say about the phone. Love to know your thoughts, your questions, and you can put those down below. Now let's move on. Quick history lesson about computers and what I've been using. Very different from Android. I love Mac computers. I used to work at a small college. I was involved in their tech department, and we all would be able to decide each couple of years whether we got a Mac or a Dell, usually. And I just saw the Macs just last long after the other computers. And so I kept choosing Macs as I was there and got very comfortable with them. Very enjoyable. You do spend a bit more, but they are so well made, and the operating system and the hardware just all works really nicely together, and it's lasted. And what I've been using since I left my full-time job there in 2014 to do this YouTube channel is this 15-inch MacBook, spec'd out really nicely. So it's a 2014 model, early 2014 I think. Maybe it's even a late 2013. It's got all these nice little ports. It's even got an SD card slot. But it literally is suffering from some repeated hardware failures and crashes. It also literally has been around the world with me and just traveled. It's been fantastic. I really have no complaints about it other than the fact that now it's starting to fail after 6+ years, and the fact that it's heavy. This 15-inch MacBook, along with its power adapter and cord in my camera bag, adds over 5 pounds to the total weight. That's significant. I don't own any lenses that are even at that weight that I'm carrying around with me. So it's time for me to get a new machine. The obvious choice would be another MacBook 15, but I'm complaining about the weight, so a MacBook 13. But here's the thing. I'm a little annoyed at Apple right now. The lack of ports on their newer machines frustrates me a bit. That plus the fact that if I do want more ports for the MacBook 13-inch, I have to spend at least $1,800 to get one with 4 USB-C ports. And one of those, of course, is taken up by power, so really 3. That seems like a lot of money to spend. And why not the MacBook Air then? Well, of course, I'm giving up even more ports, but it is a lighter device, but it's underpowered. You know, I just keep seeing review after review of people talking about it struggling during Zoom calls. Now, I don't need a top-of-the-line machine. I'm going to give you my kind of spec wish list in a minute, and you can give me your ideas, and I'll give you a couple laptops that I'm looking at. I don't need a top-of-the-line machine. I need a machine that's going to allow me to stay connected, allow me to do some Lightroom editing and Photoshop, and a little teeny bit of video editing while I'm on the go. When I'm home, I've got a nice big 27-inch iMac here. So I don't need it to be specced out. But I also don't need it to be, I don't want it to be super underpowered because I will be teaching Lightroom from it, Lightroom Classic for the most part, and it will be embarrassing if I'm teaching and I'm constantly waiting for things to render or images to load. So, middle of the road somewhere. Here's what I'm looking for. I want it to be 2 to 3 pounds, 3 pounds max. I'd love it to be USB-C. I can share chargers with my phone, with my camera, with other devices. Just about everything I own now that's important to me is USB-C, so it would be nice to have that consistency across devices and just not have to worry about proprietary chargers. 16 gigabytes of RAM minimum, 512 SSD is my minimum as well. More is okay, would be great. Less, then I'm just kind of constantly struggling, especially if it's a Windows machine, because Windows I feel like it's a little bit more bloaty and is going to take up a little bit more space. It needs to have a good screen. Doesn't have to be amazing, super color corrected, just good enough. Again, this is on the road work. This isn't my number one machine. I'd love it to have a full HDMI port for the simple reason I'm teaching, I end up somewhere and I've lost the adapter or I've forgotten it at home, and then I have no way to connect, and relying on, a hotel in Iceland to have all of the adapters needed to hook up to their projectors or their computers while I'm presenting, that's probably not going to happen. So it's not a huge deal because I can just make sure I have a couple adapters and make sure they're always in the bag, but it's just another thing to have to worry about. I would love those USB-C ports to be Thunderbolt compatible for a little bit more future proofing. Maybe it will become more of a powerful machine for me in the future if I plug in an eGPU. The graphics, integrated is okay. It would be nice if it had a dedicated graphics card, but let me give you my price. I'm looking to stay under $1,700. I don't want to really go above that. That price plus the weight of 2 to 3 pounds really does put the limit on how powerful this machine can be. And maybe I'll decide that I'm being too weight restrictive at some point. But right now that's where I'm looking in, and I think an i7 chip. Those are kind of my needs. If you watch my Instagram stories, you know that I just bought a couple of days ago from B&H used an older Dell XPS 13. It arrived, love the weight. It does have the port issue in that there's no HDMI, they're all USB-C. But this device that I bought struggled with the B key. It didn't work consistently, and the letter B is part of my name, so that's an issue. Even if it wasn't, that'd still be an issue. Plus the fans sounded a little bit noisier than they should have. Not just loud, but grindy, like a bearing or something was bad. So that's going back to B&H. I'm getting another used Dell XPS 13. I think it really fits a nice, good, sweet spot for portability and performance. There's also an Asus 14-inch ExpertBook. That sucker is just 2 pounds and it's 14 inches. But I think it's a little underpowered for what I want to do. But I'm really tempted to just buy it, try it out, and if it really struggles to run Lightroom and Photoshop as I need or do light video editing, then I'll just send it back. But those are two laptops that are at the top of my list after lots of research. I'd love to know what you think. And again, it would be very comfortable and easy to stay in the Mac world, but I feel like that's more than I want to pay. They're not as light as I want, or if they are, like a MacBook Air, then it's a good bit underpowered for what I want. So that's why I'm thinking about going PC. I'd love to know your thoughts. That's mostly the reason I'm making this video. I want to know your thoughts about the computers I listed or the specs I listed and what you might consider or suggest. You can leave those right down below. And I'll link to those two computers that I'm talking about. And also, even though I had a bad experience with B&H in this computer arriving, I just hit the return button. I've got the return sticker already. I'm going to put it out on the porch for FedEx to pick up later. It really isn't too much of a hassle, and I'll try this next one. And if this one isn't good, then I'll send that back as well. So I do recommend checking through B&H's used department for both computers and lenses and cameras, because it really is a very easy and painless process, and it can be a great way to save a lot of money. If you found it helpful, give it a quick thumbs up, and don't forget to hit subscribe along with that little bell to be notified of future videos, tips, tricks, and travel and whining about computers. In a way, I kind of feel like this whole video is similar to those emails I get where people say, I want a 24 to 2000 millimeter lens that's f2.8 constant and only costs $800. And I'm like, that defies physics. But maybe some of you computer folks out there are saying, you want a computer under 3 pounds that's super powerful, but also under 1700 that has a full HDMI port. That's physically impossible. I think there's some options out there. I may have arrived at the best already. Well, the Dell XPS doesn't have HDMI. Now I'm rambling. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.